It all started with a couple following their dreams, but their disappearance shattered everything they had worked for. That's the story we'll be exploring today. They planned their future together, put in long hours, and save enough for a fresh start. However, the subsequent search uncovered an unsettling reality when one of them disappeared along with all of their savings. Alyssa Harmon, 24, and Devin Brooks, 26, were a well-known and committed couple in East Kansas City in the summer of 2023. They had shared a childhood, neighborhood of working-class people. Both had been best friends since high school. They were described by friends as reserved yet determined, rarely interacting with others, frequently working long hours, and actively saving enough to leave Missouri and begin a new life in Austin, Texas. Metro Tires, a modest auto repair company on Blue Ridge Boulevard, was Drawn's full-time workplace. On Prospect Avenue, Alyssa worked as a cashier during the morning shift at Dollar World. The sum they earned each month was small, yet they were able to amass $14,300. They kept half in a joint Kansas trust account and half in a metal safe under their bed. Alyssa departed the flat at around 7:40 a.m. on the morning of July 3, 2023. Devin claims that she was toting around her usual shoulder bag while dressed in her work clothes. He thought she was probably on her way to work at Dollar World. He started to get worried about 100 p.m. when he attempted to text her during his lunch break but didn't receive a response. Messaging her number obliquely to the mailbox. The store manager told him that Alyssa had never shown up for her shift when he called her place of employment. The Kansas City Police Department received Devin's missing person complaint that very evening, contacting nearby hospitals, walking the neighborhood, putting posters, and going on television with a local NBC station to urge anyone with knowledge to come forward were all part of his initial attempts to find her. The possibility of a willful disappearance kept the investigation open for a few days. There were no indications of any kind of break-in at the couple's home. Please tell us in the comments from where you're viewing this so that we can begin to dig further. Your feedback is much appreciated. If you want to be sure you don't miss any of our future videos, subscribe now. Nothing was left of Alyssa, not even her overnight bag, makeup kit, or identification. The cops saw what looked like half of her closet empty. On July 10th, Devin got a fraud alert from Kansas Trust, which modified the investigation status. In this case, the lender noted a $9,800 ATM transaction from Springfield, Missouri, which is more than 160 miles away from Kansas City. Tulsa, Oklahoma's convenience shop ATM processed a second $3,000 withdrawal on July 12th. Alyssa Harmon's debit card was used for both purchases. Staff at a Springfield motel verified that a room had been reserved under Sandra H. Lewis's name after authorities used visitor records and transaction data to track her down. The visitor made a purchase in Kansas City a week prior using a prepaid Visa card. An examination of arrival records. The person allegedly stayed for 2 nights before departing without formally checking out, according to witness testimonies. After the fact, investigators looked over the security tape from the motel's entry and found that on July 5th, Alyssa was seen leaving the premises with a man who was described as black, in his mid-40s, sporting a beard and a noticeable tattoo on his neck. They both had big bags and were dressed casually. The two got into a rideshare just after 11 a.m. The film was provided to Devin for identification during a follow-up interview. Rimmel Jenkins, Alyssa's maternal uncle, was there, and he knew it. Jenkins, 45 years old, served a 6-year sentence for identity theft and wire fraud before being released from state prison in early 2023. Devin had kept raising red flags over Rammel's influence and intentions, even if he had briefly restored communication with his niece upon his release. The field of digital forensics shed light on Alyssa's strategy in additional detail. What follows is an excerpt from a note she found in her CloudSync mobile notepads drafts folder. Picked by Rammel. On my way out the door. There will be no delay. They'll assume that someone has abducted me. Soon everything will be all right. The most important thing is to take the money out of the account before it gets frozen. Timestamp, 10:17 p.m., and proposed a scheme with hidden agendas and coordinated efforts to transfer money swiftly on July 1st. According to the phrasing, Alyssa planned to orchestrate her own abduction, and Remel Jenkins knew about it, if not was involved in it. It was publicly announced by the police on July 14th that Alyssa Harmon was no longer officially listed as a missing person, and that Remel Jenkins was also wanted for a financial offense involving illegal bank transactions. Jenkins is under a multi-state notice, while Harmon is considered to be willfully missing and may be involved in fraud. Alyssa Harmon and Remel Jenkins were nowhere to be located in the 2 weeks that followed. There was no fresh activity at the bank. They discovered the safe in their flat behind the bed, empty. In a follow-up interview on July 20th, Dion Brooks said he no longer thought Alyssa had departed because she was pressured. "I believe she orchestrated it," he remarked, "but I really doubt that she had any idea of the risks involved in being with him." Despite not being a suspect, Devin Brooks continued to play an important role in the investigation as a witness and information source. He gave Alyssa complete control of his phone, laptop, and joint bank accounts. His actions were typical of someone who was oblivious of the plan. Evidence from adjacent companies' surveillance cameras and Devin's own GPS data supported his exact timetables. His account of Remel Jenkins's manipulative actions lent credence to the developing story. After obtaining Uber records through a subpoena, investigators were able to corroborate that on July 5th, Alyssa and Jenkins had gone from the Springfield motel to a regional bus terminal. On that particular day, 2 bus tickets were bought under the identities of Thomas Ray and Angela H., received as payment. Shawnee, Oklahoma, was the last place on the itinerary. Following the discovery of a rental agreement for a temporary cottage some 10 miles southeast of the city, close to Bethel Acres, on July 18th, investigators contacted local authorities in Shawnee. The leasing agreement, once again using fictitious names, was in sync with the bus schedule. A guy in his 40s and a younger lady rented the property, and the owners said they were a quiet couple. Arriving on July 6th, they departed 3 days later without engaging in conversation with neighbors or making a cleaning service request. Numerous artifacts of potential evidentiary significance were found during the July 19th permitted examination of the cabin. Police found a partially melted cell phone casing inside a little rubbish fire pit located behind the cabin. Among the women's garments discovered in the restroom was a branded blouse that matched the colors of Dollar World's uniform. Recipients from a neighboring petrol station and food packaging dated July 7th assisted with down the time range. The existence of Alyssa Harmon was verified through fingerprint analysis at the site. Unfortunately, no valid prints were found that belonged to Jenkins. Crucially, there was no obvious evidence of violence or blood at the cabin. Something had changed, though, for the phone had burned and someone had left suddenly. The idea that Alyssa was carrying out a long-term escape plot had been disproven by this point in the investigation. Rather, it was assumed that she might have had reservations or tried to escape from Remel Jenkins. Movement away from financial exploitation and toward the discovery of human remains near the Canadian River in Land County, Oklahoma, about 30 miles south of Chi, by a fisherman on July 24th, officially confirmed the abduction or murder. A blue tarp and several cinder blocks had been used to weigh down the remnants. Decomposition had progressed to an advanced stage in the corpse. The victim's left wrist bore a tiny heart-shaped tattoo, and a silver bracelet bearing the initials served as the primary means of identification. Office of the Oklahoma State Medical Examiner verified that the body was that of Alyssa Harmon, a 24-year-old. The official autopsy determined that strangling was the cause of death. The couple left the Springfield motel just days before their bodies were found, which puts their estimated time of death about 6 weeks before discovery, in the middle of July. This evidence led to the reclassification of the case as a homicide. In connection with his niece's murder, Remel Jenkins was principally implicated. He was positioned for prosecution due to his criminal record and his last known proximity to the victim, being both a direct danger and a wanted man. On July 25th, An arrest warrant was issued for him on a national level. The manhunt received assistance from the United States Marshal Service. The police started to think that Alyssa's participation in the first financial plan was not entirely voluntary, and that Rammel may have been involved in its inception. We spoke with behavioral analytic experts from the Federal Bureau of Investigations. They provided more evidence that Jenkins may have used his position of familial trust for illicit purposes, psychological techniques that are used to exert control over Alyssa's actions and choices. At the same time, Dion Brooks persisted in helping the authorities. He handed over transcripts of Alyssa's private communications from the weeks preceding her disappearance, which included multiple references to her uncle's growing involvement and his incessant talks about beginning anew in a different place. There was a message dated June 29th that said, "He's saying a lot of things that sound good, but I'm not sure I trust it. It's just fast by late." As of July, Devron no longer made any public appearances. Through his lawyer, he made a brief written statement in which he denied additional interviews. Some part of me always thought something was amiss. Even though I knew she couldn't, I still didn't want to believe it. Because she was exploited, Alyssa has now left. May she be granted justice. The inquiry into Alyssa Harmon's murder has expanded to include multiple states by the beginning of August 2023. Now that Rimmel Jenkins is the main suspect, police departments throughout. In their pursuit of him, the states of Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri worked together. The hunt was spearheaded by the U.S. Marshal Service. After Alyssa's alleged murder, Jenkins went missing and was thought to be using aliases. It seemed like he was utilizing the same strategies from his last conviction for wire fraud, which involved using several aliases, prepaid debit cards, and burner phones. Tips came in from all around the country, but the majority of them were either false or not confirmed. Jenkins was totally off his rocker. Unaware of his whereabouts, he departed, seemingly evading large urban areas and leaving no digital footprint. Investigators went back to the cabin close to Shy, Oklahoma, the last known common location of Alyssa and Rammel, in an attempt to find new leads. During a second forensic check of the premises on August 5th, officers found a concealed chamber beneath the bedroom floorboards. A duffel bag with individual possessions was found within. The things included a broken phone that was missing its SIM card, clothes that matched Alyssa's, and a little notepad with handwriting. It was determined that the notebook belonged to Alyssa Harmon. From July 2nd until the 8th, it held numerous brief entries, some of which were missing necessary details. Her increasing skepticism over their escape strategy was alluded to by several. Notable was one entry dated July 7th. "I was mistaken about Rammel. I am ensnared. Dean was missed. Please take me home." Important details about Alyssa's mental health were revealed by the article. It suggested that she may have willingly accompanied Rammel at first, but subsequently reconsidered. By the time Alyssa passed away, investigators determined that she probably wanted to go home but was unable to. Analysts, meanwhile, found new patterns in the financial records. Multiple ATM withdrawals were made throughout central and southern Texas after July 10th, which is believed to be the day of Alyssa's death. The couple's stolen funds were associated with all of them via prepaid debit cards. A pause was provided by an August 1st transaction in Waco. Footage from an ATM revealed a man who matched Jenkins's general persona, but with a new beard style and longer hair. In keeping with previous images, the camera caught a portion of a tattoo on the neck. Because of this video, the authorities were able to verify that Jenkins was really alive and in Texas. Across the state, revised announcements were disseminated. Places where Jenkins could easily go unobserved, such as tiny towns, bus routes, and convenience stores, were the primary targets of the hunt. Temple, Georgetown, and Kula continued to see cash withdrawals, according to further bank tracking. Things like food, fuel, and essential supplies were bought. Prepaid cell phones. Jenkins, according to the authorities, was making his way to Laredo, a notorious starting place for fugitives seeking to enter Mexico. In Kansas City, authorities gave reporters access to Alyssa's journal. Those who had known Jenkins in the past were also questioned. He was intelligent, patient, and constantly plotting, according to a former cellmate. A parole officer saw that he preyed on the weaker members of his family. There have been 2 previous instances of financial exploitation of women. Family members in 2014 and 2016 were reassessed, despite the fact that they had not resulted in charges before. Now that the search is focused on southern Texas, officials at the border are on high alert. It was thought that Jenkins may try to flee. Stations at bus stops, shelters, and border checkpoints were inundated with posters featuring his likeness, both as it is now and after some digital aging. The authorities thought they were drawing near by August 15th. The individual Jenkins was describing was spotted getting on a rideshare in Kula, according to surveillance footage from Truck Stop motor vehicle. But by the time the police got there, the vehicle had already departed. Nevertheless, the money went to a prepaid phone that had been registered in Waco a few days prior. One of the last crumbs that needed was this. The Laredo Police Department identified and arrested Jenkins without incident at around 10:47 a.m., standing outside the petrol station side entrance. He was discovered trying to withdraw money again. Jenkins was discovered to be in possession of 3 state-issued identification cards with different individuals, a total of 5 prepaid debit cards, and $1,740 in various currencies. Something had changed with his appearance. They were loose, basic clothes, had longer hair, and colored it a darker shade. A federal warrant for interstate flight to evade prosecution led to Jenkins' transfer to the Webb County Prison Center. Detectives from Kansas City showed up in Laredo later that day to question suspects. Jenkins consented to talk after exercising his right to legal representation. In the initial phase of the interview, Jenkins maintained that he had no role in Alyssa Harmon's murder. He asserted that Alyssa had voiced her doubts about carrying out their plan and that they had decided to part ways after they left the cabin near Shy, Oklahoma. He claimed she was alive the last time he saw her, despite her concerned demeanor. Travel documents and the cabin diary were among the pieces of evidence that cast doubt on this account of events. Specifically, when the investigators read from Alyssa's journal the entry in which when Jenkins expressed his feelings of being confined and his desire to get back to Devin Brooks, his tone changed. His demeanor shifted from calm to aggressive. He hesitated before requesting a break when shown the security footage from Waco and Kula. Jenkins provided an audio confession upon his return following a brief respite. On or about July 10, 2023, he confessed to killing Alyssa Harmon in his statement. He claims that Alyssa's skepticism of the proposal and subsequent actions led to the decision-making process. Wanted to get in touch with Devin. After she began to mention turning around, Jenkins admitted that she had been mistaken. That simply must not occur. According to his account to the investigators, Alyssa had asked how long they would have to be off the grid and if they could get their money back. Jenkins claimed he saw her reluctance to commit as an attack on his liberty. Fearing a new jail sentence due to his past fraud convictions and pending release restrictions, he drew the line at any publicity. Strangling Alyssa was Jenkins's confession as she slept in the cabin's bedroom. He said it was a short and essential deed that took less than a minute. He didn't seem sorry in his story. According to his statement to the cops, "I did what I had to do." She changed the plan. Following the murder, Jenkins took a tarp from behind the cabin, covered Alyssa's body in it, and put it in the trunk of a borrowed vehicle. He loaded up the vehicle with concrete blocks and dumped her body along the Canadian River as he drove south. He threw her phone out the window, cleaned the car, and kept going, getting money out of prepaid cards. Using toll data and gas purchase records, investigators were able to confirm this path in subsequent investigations. According to the investigators' forensic timeline, the confession was accurate. This proved that the murder was planned and not an act of spontaneity or self-defense, and that Alyssa had passed away not long after trying to back out of the plan. Jenkins was found to have used public Wi-Fi networks in Springfield and Shy to study interstate extradition legislation and evidence disposal, according to the authorities. Webb County officials officially charged Rammel Jenkins with first-degree murder, fraud, and fleeing the state. He was lodged into the Jackson County Jail in Kansas City on September 8, 2023, and extradited to Missouri under armed guard. He was unable to post bond. With the confession, the case's key issues were resolved. Motives such as power, fear of discovery, and the deliberate removal of a perceived liability escalated what started as a money scam into a murder. Jenkins acted alone, according to official prosecution confirmations, and that no one else was wanted as a suspect. Beyond the criminal processes, Alyssa's death had an impact. Victims of familial grooming and financial exploitation in their 20s were the focus of advocacy groups' attention after this case. It had all come to a tragic end because she had decided to follow someone she trusted and then tried to escape. The confession validated his suspicions, but it did little to ease Don Brooks's pain. On his behalf, his lawyer issued a brief statement. Suicide was unjustifiable because she changed her. On the subject, she was unjustly taken advantage of. On October 23, 2023, at the Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County Courthouse, the trial of Ramel Jenkins commenced. The murder of Alyssa Harmon was a high-profile case. Therefore, both local and national media covered the proceedings intently and restricted courtroom access. Throughout the trial, security was tightened. Financial fraud, identity theft, and first-degree murder were among the charges against Jenkins, as well as illegally evading prosecution. On each count, he pleaded not guilty. The prosecution was adamant for a jury trial, despite the fact that his legal team had asked for a bench trial. After 3 days of screening, a jury of 12 was chosen. Prosecutors from the Jackson County District Attorney's Office laid up a thorough case throughout the 8-day trial, utilizing physical evidence, computer forensics, and the defendant's recorded confession as its core elements. Throughout its case, the state highlighted its intentional strategy, influence, and drive. Among the most important artifacts was the journal kept by Alyssa Harmon, which was found at the cabin close to Shaw, Oklahoma. Video captured by surveillance cameras at various Texas ATMs shows Jenkins making prepaid car purchases. The disappearance's pre-planning phases are associated with bank records and SIM card transactions. Following her last verified contact, GPS data from the rideshare linked Jenkins and Harmon. Full confession video and text of Jenkins, in which he confesses to killing Alyssa following her, was eager to get back to his own place. Jenkins, according to the prosecution, broke over $14,000 in her trust by taking advantage of their familial ties. To avoid publicity and legal ramifications, he killed her when she voiced uncertainty and planned to leave. While admitting that Jenkins was involved in a fraudulent scheme, the defense insisted that the murder was not planned. Jenkins was characterized by his counsel as a product, due to a troubled background, including a history of imprisonment, mental illness, and early trauma. The defense's arguments centered on the possibility that Alyssa's murder was the result of panic rather than premeditation. They claimed that Jenkins was in emotional turmoil when he confessed and that he was partially pressured. On the 4th day of the trial, Don Brooks took the stand and gave testimony that was filled with emotion. His life with Alyssa, their plans together, the financial sacrifices they made, and regular schedules. Additionally, he shared his feelings of betrayal upon learning of the initial plot for Alyssa's disappearance and the devastating news of her death. He was level-headed, measured, and honest about how he felt. All of us were working on a joint project. Regardless, we were building despite our lack of resources. It wasn't merely savings. A lot of time and hope went into it. She was not a ghost. He took advantage of her faith in the wrong person. Family and friends of Alyssa spoke highly of her, saying that she was hopeful, trustworthy, looking forward to escaping the difficulties of their community. Before his release from prison earlier that year, RML Jenkins had not been a continuous presence in her life, according to some. The jury reached a unanimous decision on October 31st, 2023, after around 6 hours of deliberation. The jury found Ramel Jenkins guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, fraud involving money, and fleeing the state. The subsequent day, sentencing took place. Jenkins was spoken to immediately by Judge Helen Vasquez at the sentencing hearing. You betrayed the trust you earned as a family member by abusing your position and then by doing something very devastating to ruin that trust. This was not an impulsive crime. The damage was done in an irreparable pattern of exploitation. Jenkins was given a life sentence without the chance of release. In addition, the court ordered that Alyssa Harmon's estate get monetary reparation for the stolen funds. Jenkins was sentenced to serve his time at the highest security POTI's Correctional Center, as per the judge's decision, building in the middle of Missouri. The district attorney's office held a news conference after the punishment, describing the case as a warning about financial exploitation within families. The victims' advocates lauded the trial's transparency and the investigation's thoroughness. As time went on after Ramel Jenkins' conviction, the case received less and less attention in the media. For Alyssa Harmon's loved ones, the trial had provided closure, but the harm was permanent. Dever Brooks was one of those who opted out of being present at the sentencing hearing. At the time, he did not make any public statements and turned down every interview and comment request. Dion found employment in the tire and lube business located in Austin's Northeast Industrial Corridor before the beginning of 2024. Later, when asked by local reporters about Devin, the manager said that he was reliable, quiet, and finished his duties without complaint. Though he hardly spoke about it, he had a tiny framed picture of Alyssa in his toolbox storage unit. His co-workers said that despite his aloof demeanor, he was always kind. People who dealt with him at the store praised his manners and efficiency. Workshops for victim advocates and law enforcement in Missouri continued to use the Harmon case as a case study. The official record of victims of familial homicide in Missouri now includes Alyssa Harmon's name, according to the Missouri Department of Public Safety. In February 2024, her family had a private memorial service, and only close relatives and friends were invited. The media were not invited. Given that, in a lengthy prepared statement, Alyssa's mother stated, "She was too trusting. He saw that, and he used it until he killed her." The court unsealed the final case report in March 2024, which validated the investigators' belief that Ramel Jenkins had intentionally targeted his niece, as they had come to believe during the last stages of the investigation. Jenkins reappeared in Alyssa's life in early 2023, after his release from jail, stating his desire to reconcile and provide family assistance. Actually, the investigators discovered proof that his financial scheme to take advantage of her and her boyfriend had already been planned. There was a pattern of manipulation that started months before the disappearance, as shown in text conversations, internet history, and transaction records. The actions of Jenkins were later described by forensic psychologists as a form of cunning nepotism. His method was methodical. He first built trust, then isolated the target, and last introduced a high-risk proposal that seemed like a solution. Further records showed that Jenkins had earlier sought to entangle two additional female cousins in 2014 and 2016 using analogous techniques. He had asked for access to funds and suggested cooperative financial endeavors in both instances. The records were included as evidence during sentencing and made public after conviction, even though neither incident escalated to violence or official charges were filed. Educational materials issued by organizations aimed at preventing domestic abuse started to include Alyssa's experience. The case did not involve romantic coercion at first, but advocates brought attention to the fact that Jenkins's tactics were similar to those commonly observed in spousal abuse situations, namely the phases of psychological manipulation, financial control, and isolation. After moving, Dion Brooks was virtually unreachable in the public eye. He shared a brief statement on a private social media account with pals a year after Alyssa's death on July 10, 2024. She remained put. It was her turn. Plus, I'll always be mad at myself for being blind to it. He made no further public comments about the subject after then. A small plaque dangles over the service desk at the Austin establishment where Dion is employed. Trust is built, never borrowed. It's mounted in a plain black frame and mostly goes unnoticed by customers. But those in the know claim it represents all he no longer says out loud.